Good morning. It is 11:37 a.m. on Sunday, July 15th, 2018. I'm Christiana Ellis and I slept nice and late today. This is 5 more minutes. Because it's Sunday, I'm continuing my rewatch of The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. This time we're talking about Season 1, Episode 9 in the original broadcast order, titled Someday in the Rain. Now, this is very much what could be described as a filler episode, particularly because nothing of real consequence actually happens. It's a sort of slice of life between the adventures episode for everybody. We have Kyon basically talking about how it's just sort of a quiet, cold, and rainy day, and the plot, such as it is that Haruhi has arranged for an appliance store to give them a free heater, so he has to go get it. And while he's gone, Haruhi takes more pictures of Mikuru, and kind of that's mostly it. So lots of kind of just, calm downtime. Now, it's worth noting that as far as the chronological order concerns, we've talked about this in multiple episodes, of course, is that the non-chronological order that we're seeing this in, strictly speaking, of all of the anime episodes between Season 1 and Season 2, this is the last chronologically. So only the movie takes place after this. From the perspective of the entire story in a chronological order. And I think that's interesting, especially just because there's a couple of places in this episode where Kyon kind of looks around the club room and sees lots of stuff, memories of things that, some of their adventures that they've had. We see the baseball gear from the episode The Boredom of Haruhi Suzumiya. We see some of Mikuru's various costumes. We see a bunch of laptop computers with some sort of a game. And we'll actually find out more about that in the episode Day of Sagittarius. We see some of the costumes that are there for Mikuru are costumes that we have not seen her get or wear yet. What we see, though, that in this sort of last episode chronologically, we see Haruhi in both lights in this episode, I think, right? We start off the series with her really kind of just in her eccentric, or crazy obsessions and her abusive Mikuru and all of that sort of thing. Her pushy side. But then over the course of what we've watched so far, we see that here and there where Haruhi has some actual empathy or her own vulnerabilities, we see here and there. And in this episode, I think we kind of see both. For one, getting a new heater for the club room. We could say that's potentially a selfish thing too, right? But it does help everybody in the club room to have a new heater, and Kyon even himself admits that it's like someone has to go get it, and who is it you think it should be instead of you? And even though one of the only reason it shouldn't be Koizumi is because he's been given like an officer position, mostly because he never tells Haruhi no for anything. So he says, well, I guess it's actually a reasonable request for once, even though he's not thrilled about going all the way down the mountain and everything. But we do also see that there was an ulterior motive. Haruhi knew that Kyon might object to her taking pictures of Mikuru in all these various costumes if he was still there. So she got rid of him in order to be able to do it free and clear. And ostensibly all of these new pictures are for the cover and or bonus features of the DVD of the movie that we saw as the first episode, The Adventures of Mikuru Asahina. And we will see the making of that movie in future episodes as part of the Sai of Haruhi Suzumiya arc. So it's played as a gag again that in this case Haruhi, first of all, is kind of forcing Mikuru to take, to pose for all these pictures in the first place in all these various costumes, but also insisting on participating in the disrobing part. And we get a couple of sight gags where we hear Haruhi and Mikuru, Haruhi demanding various things and Mikuru sort of protesting, and we don't ever see any nudity or anything because we get a camera position from behind the bookshelf, and as Yuki gets up and places or removes various books, we see different parts of the background, and so it kind of the camera setup is set to obscure anything that would go above PG. And so we also get in this episode a fair amount of everyone just kind of sitting around and being quiet while listening to some of the various other clubs or extracurricular activities at the school that you can kind of hear through the thin walls that Kyon mentions at the beginning. We hear like the band doing band practice. We hear what's probably the drama team doing some sort of a play or improv or so we hear various things, but it's all kind of quiet and muffled. I don't think we're meant to take any like real meaning from any of the content of that. I have listened to it with the volume up during those sections just to kind of see, and it's all just intended, I think, to be the sort of stuff that you kind of just overhear through the walls, when there's other activity in the building. But, we get all of that happening. We get more of Yuki, who doesn't even speak in this entire episode, just continuing to read. We get more of Koizumi literally just immediately agreeing to anything Haruhi says. Mikuru continuing to be in her position of, not really wanting to do all of this stuff that Haruhi is proposing, but also not really kind of standing up for herself about it. Like ultimately conceding and mostly just protesting at how like the speed and raising sort of half-hearted concerns like I don't really remember even wearing this costume in the movie. But what we also finished the episode with, and this is going to be a relative, a shorter one today, just because not a lot happens. But we finished the episode with Haruhi or Kyon finally returns with the heater, and when he returns, only Yuki is even in the room, and he's tired from the journey, and he's comfortable now that they've got the heater, and so he kind of just falls asleep there at the little clubroom table. When he wakes up, he sees Haruhi sort of looking startled, looking down at him. And I think what we're meant to conclude is she was watching him sleep. And when he woke up and saw her, she was embarrassed that he would know she was watching him sleep. And he immediately goes to, you didn't draw anything on my face, did you? And she's offended, and then they're back to their other dynamic. But we have a moment there, right, where there's something in between them that neither of them really can talk about. Kyon is, at least at this moment, unable to see or unwilling to believe that she has feelings for him. And so he takes it to, she's playing a prank on me. Even though, generally speaking, we don't see her play a lot of pranks on Kyon, right? Like, she does all sorts of stuff to Mikuru and everything. Like, he says, you didn't draw something on my face again, did you? But that doesn't really seem like Haruhi's style. That's almost more something he's kind of putting on her, right? And so she's offended because he's accusing her of something like that, which she wouldn't do, and that it kind of allows both of them to brush past this awkward tension of she was watching him sleep. Which, incidentally, we kind of also got a hint of during Remote Island Syndrome, the first part, because he was asleep and woke up to Mikuru taking pictures of him while he was asleep, only to learn that it was actually Haruhi who told her to do that. And then at that time, she kind of jumps it to, it's to document that you were sleeping while everyone else was awake, and that's like we should set an example or something. And what I think we really start to see in this episode more clearly than any of the ones in the order we've been watching so far, well, I guess we've seen it here and there in terms of like jealousy with, whenever Kyon is paying attention to Mikuru. But Haruhi's clearly got feelings that maybe she doesn't even entirely understand about Kyon. Why did he pick her, or why did she pick him to drag around and make part of this club? What does she feel about all this? And so we get more kind of playfulness of she's not only watching him sleep, but she stayed late after everyone else left because she didn't want to just leave him there alone, and she didn't want to wake him up either. Now think about Haruhi and everything we've seen from her so far and all of the stuff that she does, even frequently against Kyon's protestation. Why else would she not feel comfortable just telling him to get up? Instead, she stays late after everyone else is gone, puts her cardigan on him to keep him warm as he sleeps, even though he already had one on, presumably from either Yuki or Mikuru. And she just stayed to be there with him while he sleeps. And then he doesn't have an umbrella. It's raining. So she has one. She offers to have them walk down the hill together. But even still, they can't quite keep it at a just empathy level. Because as he's kind of complaining that it's like, wait, this umbrella isn't even yours. It says faculty on it. And then she's like, oh yeah, well, if you're going to complain, then maybe you don't need to borrow it at all. And she kind of dances away with it and makes a face. And I think that even though this is an episode where, in terms of like plot, nothing really happens, I find it charming because even though it features Haruhi doing some of the same stuff to Mikuru that's really kind of awful, that we kind of started the series with, and we see a bit more of later. We also see the part of her that's a little bit more caring and vulnerable. And I think that's interesting. So, that is this episode, Someday in the Rain. According to the wiki, it's also notable because this is the only episode of the anime that is a completely original story, meaning it wasn't based on one of the books. It was just brand new for the anime. But next time, we're going to be talking about The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya Part 4. We're back to that main plot arc. Back to the very beginning of this story. We're going to continue from where we left off, which was basically we had basically had Kyon learning about Yuki being an alien, Mikuru being a time traveler, Koizumi being an Esper, and that's kind of where we left things. And so we're going to pick back up in that main arc for one more episode. Then we'll have a couple more, in between episodes before we'll finish out season 1 with, the conclusion of that opening arc. But in the meantime, yes, next week, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya Part 4. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.